Sew a quilt in a weekend. A quilt just gives off that homey, warm feeling because you associate with something mom or grandma used to make. You imagine that they made it lovingly with their hands, and when you put it around you to keep you warm, you almost feel their embrace upon you. But quilting is not age-bound. Anyone who has imagination can make a quilt, and make it in just one weekend. Think of it as a weekend project, after which you will have your own quilt ready for gifting, for winter, or just as a badge of doing some creative work. To sew a quilt in a weekend, follow this guide to get you starting. You will be making your quilt over the weekend, but it is best to start preparations on day 0, or Friday afternoon or evening. Gather the fabrics that you will be using. It is good to get contrasting colors. Get some dark and light fabrics. To prepare your fabrics for the quilting, wash them and let them dry. Iron them afterwards. This will ensure that the fabrics you will be sewing will stay as is and will not shrink later on. After ironing, you can now start cutting up fabric. Cut 15 strips of 3.5 by 42 inches of dark fabric and 12 strips of the same length of light fabric. Cut out 31 squares of 9.5 by 9.5 light fabric. In choosing the fabric for the quilt, you can pick anything that strikes your fancy. On day 1, which would be Saturday, you will be sewing the pieces. Get all the strips that you have prepared the night before and sew them together. Get the edges of the dark strip and sew it on a light strip and so forth. When you have sewn all the strips together, cut them into 3.5-inch segments. Prepare a first batch of 64 of these segments, and a second of 12. Now you can start making those squares or blocks. You will be making 32 blocks for your weekend quilt project. Stitch together 2 dark and light segments. Sew a row of 7 blocks. Alternate pieced blocks with the squares you already prepared. If you started the first row with pieced block, the next row starts with a square block. Continue sewing until you complete 9 rows of 7 alternating blocks. On day 2, or Sunday, you can start beefing up and finishing the quilt. Prepare the batting and backing fabrics. Use filler fabric for the inside to make the quilt softer. Put all the fabrics, all slightly larger than the quilt, beneath it. Put the quilt on your sewing machine and start sewing running stitches on it. When all the stitches are finished, you will see the little blocks as if popping with softness. Stitch along the edges to close off the quilt. The excess backing fabric will be used to serve as a border. Fold the excess fabric over the front and sew it. Voila! You have just successfully created a quilt in just a couple of days. You have just made your ancestors proud.